and humans are really good at workarounds. We have finite brain capacity, and the flood of information that's coming in, especially with Gen AI, can't be processed by humans.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us and welcome to the Founders in LA podcast. I'm your host Ethan Cole, and this is an opportunity to shine the spotlight through a product lens on some of the exceptional founders we have in LA as in an unedited, one-take organic conversation. With us today is Jon Lemelman. Thanks for joining us, Jon.
Thanks for having me. Great to be in LA from freezing Boston.
Yeah, so in this episode, he's the founder who's in LA in the studio to chat with us, not from LA, but we love him just the same. Excited to have you here, Jon.
Thanks very much for being here.
All right. Love to talk with you more about your project, but first, a word from our sponsors. Founders in LA is brought to you by Nearshore. Nearshore is a trailblazer in nearshore outsourcing and staff augmentation. With over 15 years of experience offering exceptional Latin American software development, data, product, and design talent for U.S. projects, Nearshore has revolutionized the ways companies scale their teams. They stand apart with 50% female leadership, are trusted by companies large and small, and have been helping U.S. customers grow since before nearshoring was cool. Discover how Nearshore can power your tech goals and help you stay lean while scaling fast. Learn more at www.nearshore.com. That's www.nearsure.com. We're also brought to you by Unita Club. Unita Club is a co-working space that sets itself apart. With locations in El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, and Hermosa, Unita is where creativity flourishes. Unlike traditional offices, they provide an inspiring environment where ideas can thrive and businesses can grow. With Unita, there's no hidden fees, flexible terms, options for dedicated offices, and unlimited access to conference rooms, a photo studio, this podcast studio, plus standard 3D printers and 24/7 access at any of their locations. They're local champions who support neighborhood businesses, open their event spaces to nonprofits, and celebrate art, music, and culture. Join Unita Club and experience co-working like never before. Learn more at www.unita.club. That's www.unita.club. Our guest today is Jon Lemelman. Jon is the co-founder and CEO of Classify. Hey, Jon, can you just give us a 30-second description of Classify?
Of course. So whether we notice it or not, while we're listening to this podcast, there's emails, Slack messages, comments in Google Docs, browser tabs open, and that doesn't stop. And it's wasting a lot of our time and our attention by constantly monitoring these systems to stay prepared. So that's the problem we solve. We believe that customers deserve their time back and their attention back. And so we're giving it back to them with Classify, which is an always-on assistant. It's designed for anybody. So now, whether you are a junior product manager, a customer success person, a founder of a small company, you can enjoy the organizational assistance that typically was reserved just for senior executives. So we do this by aggregating your information very securely in one place. And then we have a system that intelligently organizes it and prioritizes it for you. So in our UI, you'd see your day, any event on your calendar. And when you click on that event, you'll see any of the information you need to be prepared. So our mission is to make sure that you don't miss anything important, and to do that with as little human intervention as possible.
So essentially, it's kind of like, if you will, like an executive assistant, or taking some responsibilities from an executive assistant who will sift through your emails, or maybe you're a junior member of your team who can sift through your emails and give you some of the bullet points of the things that are really important to you, instead of having you to be constantly monitoring each of the different channels for important signals.
Yeah, there's two ways that our users do it. Most people do it themselves. So we have this loop that is very, very ingrained because it's how we learned how to use a computer. And humans are really good at workarounds. We have finite brain capacity, and the flood of information that's coming in, especially with Gen AI, can't be processed by humans. Like with all the meeting transcriptions, things like people are never going to be able to read all that.
Right.
So we digest it again very securely. And because we take all of the kind of who, what, when, where, why of your information, we can glean what's most important and serve up the information to you when you need it. So most people are doing this themselves and spending tons of time and distraction doing it. Some people do have administrative help doing it, and we can cut down the time. If there is a human that somebody's hired to keep them organized, we can save them a bunch of time as well. But most people in our market, which we're focused on serving the SMB market, so companies less than 200 employees typically, don't have an admin. So now we can give everybody at a company for very low cost the same administrative help that was, again, usually enjoyed by other folks. So
what are the kind of the features that you're building on the roadmap ahead of you that you're most excited about, the things that you think are going to help change the behavior of folks and how they do their daily work?
Yeah, you mentioned the most important thing we think about is behavior change. That's also the hardest thing for any productivity app. So behavior change is really hard for humans. So we actually just yesterday got a prototype from one of our data scientists presented, which kind of blew our minds. And so we're focused on providing this value with as little behavior change as possible. So we have built a series of AI-based workflows using large language models and vector databases that will allow you to automatically have a meeting briefing, like a summary of who said what, who did what, any promises that were made, any to-dos that might have been missed, automatically at the touch of one button for any meeting on your calendar. So we had that demoed yesterday. It was very, very good. And so we fast-tracked actually building it into the application, and we're going to give it to 20 customers the week after next when it's done, and see how they like conversing with their assistant that is already ingested and organized all the things that are related specifically to that particular meeting. So it's our use case for AI is a little bit more complicated than some others. So it's not the same as taking just like one meeting transcription and putting it through ChatGPT or generating a piece of marketing context. We have to, in real time, ingest like your Slack messages, comments in your Google Docs, any links that were shared, emails from a particular set of people about a particular topic. So we've been working on this for a while with a number of different abstractions, and to see what we saw yesterday like really made me excited because I've been doing this for a while and iterating on it for quite a while.
So the new feature will help you, I guess, so I can kind of redigest it for some listeners. So it'll help take bits of information from different channels like Slack and messages and other messages and emails and meeting notes and kind of put that together. So if you're in a meeting, if you leave a meeting, it's like, hey, here are all the bits and pieces of information that came together to prepare, like to take your next steps.
Yeah, we're automating what humans do. So what we all do when we want to prepare for a piece of work on our calendar is go to figure out who said what. So who said what would be a message, or who did what. It could be somebody mentioned you, or they're working in a Figma board. And so at its essence, we are just automating the repeated process of trying to make sure we don't miss something by figuring out who said what and who did what. And we use calendar because our belief is if it's on your calendar and if it's on your calendar frequently, it is likely important. If it's not, you probably have other issues.
Yeah, and if you push a meeting, it's probably not as important as the meetings that you make sure you attend consistently.
Yeah. We have a couple of customers that are CEOs that actually use Classified to not attend meetings. So we're able to give them, context across, if you're managing a very large organization and you can't attend every meeting, or you can't monitor what a larger team of people are doing with a customer, we give you the fastest way to figure out, again, who did what or said what, whether it's directly related to you or whether it's for your team. And so the most impactful meeting type for Classify in terms of value from our existing customers is something with an external party. So most of the time a customer could be an investor. So we're pretty proud of that. We have a lot of testimonials where customers will tell us, oh, the customer was like really surprised that I knew that they did something in a document, they updated something, or they asked me a question right before the meeting and I knew exactly what they were after, what their sentiment was, what they asked me. And so we kind of allow people to see around corners.
So one way to think about it is it's like the ultimate prep for any meeting. Like it pulls together, hey, here's the history of the conversation with people. Here are the bullet points, high level bullet points, so that when you walk into it. So in that way, it's like a good junior member of a team where, hey boss, here's what we said last week. Here are the bullet points. Here's what you want to discuss. Here's what you want to cover.
Here's what the people in the meeting care about. Yes, it is the fastest place to stay prepared. And the beauty of it is also, I suffer from ADHD. That's why I started, one of the reasons why I started the company. So we've all been there, like having every time that at least I have to go to my email or to Slack, which is a really bad offender, or have 20 browser tabs open, it's very easy for me to get distracted. If I'm going for a specific purpose, it's very easy for me to look at like all the unread emails. Now we're doing that triaging for people. So you have one place, and when I click on a meeting, I have just what I need to prepare for that particular meeting. So it's one place that's designed beautifully by our head of design, Kiana, to be very soothing, very simple, not anxiety provoking. So there are a lot of, I think every product or service does a job for its customers. Mm-hmm. We're saving you time and giving you, more focus, but there's also a lot of emotional jobs that come with Classify. So our hope is that we're also providing people that are generally flooded with information and really kind of under the gun and stressed, a more peaceful way to get through their day and get their work done.
So, an AI assistant didn't exactly exist when we were growing up. How did you find yourself?
Especially you. I didn't even have electricity when I was growing up. I'm so old.
How did you come to find yourself in this position that you're running this company? Yeah. Did you always expect to go off and run your own company and be an entrepreneur in tech, or how did you find yourself here?
No, man, I have a really strange background that brought me to this point in my journey. So for 25 years, I was an investor in later stage technology companies. So I was a partner at a private equity fund in Boston, focused on writing larger checks of kind of $20 to $100 million into established founder-owned IT services and software companies. And I got really burnt out because it was a pretty intense job. My kids were getting into high school. This was 2018 or so. And I'm a little nerdy. So I started tracking my time. Like, where am I even spending my time right now? I knew I wasn't spending enough time with my kids for sure. So that was fix number one. So it turns out that I was spending a fair amount of time looking for data. So I was buried in email. We started having portfolio companies that were using Slack and Teams and Discord. Right. We had multiple CRMs. And I even had an assistant. I had a human dedicated to me who was helping me, and she was spending tons of time like preparing me for the things on my calendar. And so then I started asking some of our employees, and in private equity and in asset management, you hire a lot of really expensive people.
Right.
And I was sitting there having lunch with 3 people that we hired out of business school, who we paid, $300 to $500 a year. And I asked them, how many hours a week would you say you spend like pulling together information, looking for it, organizing just information, not thinking, judging, doing what we really paid you to do out of, Stanford Business School. And they said, like 4 or 5 hours, but that just kind of comes with the territory, or I'll have an associate do it. And so the more people I kind of held up the problem to, the more I heard like there's clearly a better way, and clearly in the future, we won't work with these tools the way we're working with them now. And so the light went on. I tinkered with it for a little bit. And then when COVID hit, my co-founder, Tate, and I started getting phone calls. Like, we didn't launch the product. We actually put it down for a while. So we weren't sure it was like ready enough to like quit our jobs and dive in, which obviously, as you need to do.
Especially coming from private equity, like the bar is high for what you're already getting paid. So in order to leave that to start a startup,
Yeah, you got to be a little crazy, and
Yeah.
it was not maybe not the most economically rational decision. We'll see. Story is yet to be fully written, but it's I'm very passionate about it, so I wouldn't change it for the world. So we started getting calls when COVID hit because everybody now was working remotely, and people were having to use a lot more tools and collaborate without being in person. And so after the third call of, hey, that prototype I saw, did you ever start that company? Because I kind of get it now. I'm experiencing the problem. I called Tate. I'm like, hey, man, it's rare that you would put something down, talk to people about it, and then a year later they would ask you, did you solve the problem? And so we ended up both leaving, raised a couple $1 million of angel money, and we have been on this journey to product market fit, which hopefully we're close to achieving.
And it's something that resonates here that we've seen a number of times on this podcast is the founder product fit. And so understanding the market and building within that space. And so it sounds like your experience in private equity in terms as I've experienced private equity, I've seen it, a lot of it has to do with automation and finding efficiencies. Like you take companies that may not be as strong as they could be, and you try to find ways to make them work more lean and more efficiently and effectively. And so essentially you've taken those decades of experience of being in that world, looking at business processes as challenges that need to be fixed and looking for pain points. And one that you've come across is this idea of, hey, how much time is being spent by these well-salaried people to do things that doesn't require a well-salaried person to do.
Yeah.
And that's pulling together all these different bits of information from different places and then putting them in one place at one time so you're ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a lot of you alluded to pattern recognition. When you look at 200 or 300 software companies a year for 22 years, hopefully one's reasonably self-aware and listens, you learn a few things, and there's not an infinite number of business models. So there's clearly the ability to automate was one. And then the other thing that I learned is by learning from a lot of really good CEOs and operators and founders, because typically the companies we were investing in got to $50 to $100 million in revenue, often with no outside capital,
wow,
which takes a whole different set of skills. One of our prior CEOs is actually an investor in Classify and my mentor. He's a great operator. His name is Smith Ewell. And you also learn a lot of what not to do because nobody gets it right. Everybody makes bad investments. You're taking on a fair amount of risk, and really being self-aware and understanding, looking in the mirror. The good CEOs, even when they don't get it right, nobody bats 1,000, look in the mirror and fail really fast and are really, really brutally self-aware. And that's part of the culture that we are building at Classify is, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. We're trying to do something that no one's ever done before. But what's not okay is not understanding why we failed and, failing as fastly, as cheaply as we can.
What would be fascinating for folks, and a lot of folks who listen to this are either building right now or want to build one day. Mm-hmm. Do you have an example of something that like maybe maybe the last 2 or 3 months of something where you failed fast? Because a lot of people, your knowledge of running businesses is really huge. It's really interesting to have this dynamic of investor turned startup founder.
Yeah.
A lot of learnings from there. So in terms of failing fast, is there a specific instance you can describe?
Absolutely. I don't know if this counts as failure, but more of a pivot. But when we started the company, we had this very strongly held belief that, we want to solve problems in private equity because I knew all the customers, I experienced the problem, vertical market focus makes things easier to start, all of that stuff. And we put a prototype in front of 50 private equity venture people in the space.
Right.
And everybody had the problem, but nobody used the application because of the behavior change. And there's a bunch of reasons I don't need to bother you with. And I remember the meeting. It was actually the day before my birthday in 2021. I on March 20th, where we had a meeting and we had some outsourced consultants that were kind of playing back. Here's what we learned, and they felt like, okay, we have to like figure out how to position this, because like we know that John wants to do this in his industry, so we have to force fit the data we got to what they expected, I wanted to do. And I said, time out. Like, the goal here is to generate, value for our investors. So like ARR, essentially.
Right.
And if we don't think the fastest path to ARR in this problem space is this vertical, like, let's call time out and go test it with folks that we think don't have as much friction. So understand why we weren't getting the uptake we wanted. So that was a huge learning. I don't know if it was a failure per se. I think it was actually like the best thing that could have ever happened to us. And it was the biggest learning for me was, especially when you're managing a team, if people are like managing with data, managing up, no bueno. Like, we want like the cold, hard, like facts, and we can all reason together and challenge each other about our analysis of and judgments of those facts. But we try to be like ruthlessly intellectually honest and self-aware. And it's, again, this concept of it's okay to be wrong, right? And that's part of what these startups are. I mean, I think this is my first really early stage 0 to 1. It's really just, you have fixed bucket of money, and it's how many experiments can you run really, really fast until the experiments start resulting in engagement in your app, and then eventually people paying you for the product.
Yeah, I think a mistake that some folks make when they're building is they focus too much on the product and not the company. And so it's that, they're building, like, to your point, like, I'm not trying to build this product. I'm trying to build a company that solves a problem. So like, the product could very much change. I could be totally wrong. And good leaders will take that and identify that, yeah, I was wrong in that hypothesis. Thank you for the data. Let's go in this direction, because that's what the data is telling us to do.
Yeah, and we're doing this real time right now. So this prototype that I mentioned that we're really excited about, one of the things we need to learn, we have a very, very specific problem statement, which is, or product outcome, which is to make sure that our customers noticeably spend less time preparing for their days and classify than they do in the old way they were doing it, right? So it has to be noticeable, right, and measurable. The prototype we saw, there's 2 ways to do that. You can curate an experience for people with prompts so that you press one button and you get, a summary. What we saw yesterday was the data is ingested. We had some curated prompts, but then there's just a big text box like a ChatGPT where you could ask it anything. And we started asking it, Kiana started asking it questions, and the answers were like pretty good. But we're like, oh, wow, this isn't necessarily the problem we're solving, but this is pretty good. And so what we're going to do is, one of the things we need to learn is, do we need to or want to expand our problem space or not? Or do we want to refine the AI to focus it specifically? So what we're going to do is give 20 customers some curated prompts and then a box. I don't know what they're going to type in there, but we'll learn some stuff. So that's an example of one where, creating the right what we want to learn is like the key, and then you can figure out what you do with that, with that information after. Yeah,
and how are they going to use it, and what actually resonates with them. So at the end of the day, you want to build something that people use.
Yeah, we all use products for unintended purposes all the time. Whether it's lots of simple, silly examples. Like for me, when I need to send my kids a link, that's on my computer, but I want to get it on my phone, I just like put it in Slack and DM it to myself, because that's the fastest way to do it. That would be an example of like
I do it all
a
the time.
hack. Is that like the intended use of like Slack and my phone? No, but that's okay.
I am victim to that as well, or I'm guilty of that as well.
Yeah.
Using them in whatever way works best for me. And then from Slack's perspective, like, you're like, great guys, just use it. As long as you're using it, it's terrific. We don't care if you Slack yourself messages or reminders.
Yeah.
How did you? I think you touched on this briefly, but how did you go about finding those first customers?
Through our network. So we are very big believers in the lean startup methodology, and so the benefit, I guess, of being a little bit of an older founder who's customer facing is you make some friends and you're able to get some folks that actually everybody resonates with the problem and identifies with it. So I think we feel comfortable that a lot of people want the solution. And so it was a lot of begging and favors and how can I help you? And will you please try the app? Just give me brutally honest feedback.
Yeah.
So, and we're blessed. We have one of our other partners, our head of product and design is also very customer facing. So we have two kind of maniacal networkers on the team. And so that's how we've gotten to our first few customers. And we've kind of segmented them. We initially started in private equity, as you know, we pivoted. Then we had some customer facing workers at like bigger enterprises try it. And then we pivoted to some of the small and medium-sized businesses. That's been a little harder for me, quite frankly, because I haven't done as much early stage, is trying to create community and getting in front of, smaller businesses. They're a little harder to find. But so far, people have been, and the nice thing about the startup ecosystem, everybody's so open, curious, creative, and frankly, generous with their time. And that's been really refreshing, because I was a little bit jaded being kind of an older person coming from finance, where people are very guarded with their information and guarded with their time, and maybe a little bit less intellectually curious at times. It's been fun. I
mean, and that's been one of the pure joys of doing these interviews and having some of these podcasts. There really are some fantastic people in LA specifically, but more broadly also in the wider startup ecosystem. So good shout out to the genuineness and the caring nature of people who are out there trying to help each other build. And I appreciate you coming down here and sharing your knowledge and your tips and tricks.
Sure, absolute pleasure. Thanks, Ethan.
Of course. And then just to recap what you said there with the networks, is I think that was interesting. It was like buckets of networks. So you had your first customer segment you thought, was PE. So you tapped that network, and then you're like, oh, let's try this other network. So we've heard several different folks mention their networks. So it's just kind of worth bringing back up that there's buckets of networks. It's not just like, hey, spray your whole network, but if you segment it to who your persona is, as you shift or as you really refine it, that allows you to have other potential customers. So would you recommend that kind of segmenting? If you're just starting out, you kind of segment it and start in small batches instead of spraying your network?
I would think, aside from whether you're going to find them through your network or wherever you find them, like who and refining who to the smallest kernel that you can test is critical. If you don't know who you're building or designing for, or whose problems you really care about, it's next to impossible to do 0 to 1. I think that is the first thing anyone would need to do. And then, so you are segmenting your network, but the why behind segmenting the network is completely driven by, I think, proper customer discovery. Because it's hard to hard to work with a product trio of designers and engineers and product managers and marketers to convince somebody of something if you don't know who that is, what they care about, where they live, and why they have the problem.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that tidbit.
Yeah.
And grounding this in Los Angeles, because we love that here. I know you're just visiting, but we always ask our guests, what's the most LA moment that you've had? It could be tech related or not.
Yes. So I thought a lot about this. It's also one of my favorite LA evenings. So I was here for a conference, and it was one of these like stuffy private equity. Everybody's in like I used to call it the running of the Blue Blazers.
Okay.
And we had a few other like folks. I'm really into music. We ended up blowing off the dinner, the stuffy dinner at the conference. We got tickets to a show at the Greek Theater, like rolled over to the Greek, which I'd never been to, which is a phenomenal, like storied venue.
Right.
Post show, in and out, drink at the Chateau Marmont nightcap.
Wow.
Home.
They should
quintessential LA.
They should make that part of the schedule for the conference. You should go back to the organizers.
Yes, it's like you have the regular track, then you have the enlightened track, where you go to see music at the Greek and to In and Out and to the Chateau for a cocktail after.
That's maybe run into Lindsay Lohan. You never know.
You never know.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jon, for stopping by and chatting with us and telling us about Classify.
Pleasure. Thanks so much.
We've been speaking with Jon Lemelman. He is the co-founder and CEO of Classify. And Jon, where can they find it?
So www.useclassify.com. We're in the middle of actually expanding our beta. So if you use some combination of Google Workspace, Slack, Google Drive, and Google Calendar, and you're customer facing, we'd love to have you try the application.
Oh, and you might get to be a lucky person to try the new feature too. So sign up soon. I'd like to thank again, Jon. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Nearshore and Unida. I'd like to thank you all for listening to us. And if you like what you hear, please smash that subscribe button. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on Founders in LA.